From losing out on $100,000 at a failed auction to spending a whopping sum of 40 grand on stolen diamonds, here are some Pawn Stars deals that almost left the business bankrupt. Starting with the fact that the pawnshop business is definitely unreliable, the risk is somewhat expected. But wait, weren't auctions supposed to be a safe backup? You'd think so. Rick thought so as well. When he tried to sell off many of his big-ticket items, like an Indian motorcycle from the 1940s that had a proper sidecar, at Julian's auctions in Los Angeles, alongside a Fender Stratocaster once owned and played by the one and only Vic Flick. Honestly though, you have nothing new here. This is what the world-famous shop does when it can't sell an item through in-shop retail. But perhaps these items would have been better off collecting dust in the shop until someone eventually bought them instead of being auctioned off to people who don't really care all that much about old motors. Rick lost the shop a whopping $29,000 on the motorcycle alone, but the guitar sale was worse off, reporting a loss of about $35,000. The other items didn't do too well either, because Rick's total loss from that auction is estimated to be $100,000. Yikes! That's a big number. Rick said he felt like he got his back handed to him that day. And while he's looked back and tried to find a brighter side to this whole situation, you and I both know that there probably aren't any. Poor Rick was actually so embarrassed that he didn't even want to go back to the shop. And honestly, I wouldn't either. But maybe this can be a teachable moment. Don't rely on outside sources to run your business in-store. I mean, who wouldn't want to use Vic Flick's guitar, right? Especially one that really belonged to him and wasn't just a scam. You know, like that fake autograph by Shoeless Joe Jackson. Poor Rick always seems to be making ill-fated gambles in the shop, and it's only worse when he fails to consult his experts. That's exactly what he did when a man walked in with a book with a signature by the legendary Joe Jackson, who, as you all probably know, wasn't literate. Joe couldn't even write, so the minimum autographs that he did give out are a national treasure at this point. Naturally, Rick was very excited about it making its way into his shop. He even thought that it was probably the rarest sports signature ever. But well, you know what this video is about, so it's no surprise that he was totally wrong. He didn't go into it blindly. Rick made sure to check if the seller had an authenticity certificate. He just didn't check whether the certificate itself was authentic. After Rick bought the book for about $16,000, his book expert, Rebecca, told him that the sign was a scam. Another authenticator only reaffirmed this, saying that the sign was pretty bad for a forgery. I can't even imagine the embarrassment Rick must have felt after hearing that. Maybe that's why he made the bad decision on the Jimi Hendrix guitar deal. Unlike the autograph, this guitar wasn't a fake. Rick Harrison couldn't contain his inner fanboy from jumping out from behind the counter, calling the guitar the coolest one to ever make its way into the shop. He wasn't going to wait to get this verified, though. The shop owner called in Jesse Amoroso of Cowtown Guitars to authenticate the item, and it was officially confirmed. It had every minor detail, even the correct serial number. There was no room for doubt now. Amoroso estimated that the guitar could go up to $1 million at an auction, and Rick, being the profit-maximizing businessman that he is, only put up $450,000 in front of the seller, who wasn't pleased with this offer, because he wanted nothing less than $750,000. The seller wasn't interested even when Harrison raised his offer to $600K, and that was the end of that, until it wasn't. It turns out that Amoroso's Cowtown Guitars bought the guitar, inflicting a huge potential loss for the pawn shop. Talk about being stabbed in the back, or is this just what business is all about? Anyway, we all know that losing money by not buying something is never too bad, but buying fake luxury items is never going to end well. Corey Harrison may have grown up in the pawn shop, but with Rick as his teacher, he did have to learn some lessons the hard way. When he was 18, the young Harrison bought around 6 fake Rolex watches in just 1 week. You can't even call this one deal because it's not like he bought them all at once. He bought one after the other for a total of $4,000. It's safe to say his family was not impressed. And unfortunately, Corey didn't learn much about background checks either, because he lost a larger sum on a fake Willie Mays uniform later. When I say large sum, I mean $31,000, by the way. Corey was confident that the uniform brought into the shop was the real deal, a game-worn Willie Mays San Francisco Giants uniform from 1961. So confident that he forgot to look at the very obvious red flags, like how the uniform looked too pristine to have been worn in a game by Willie Mays, who was always sliding around in dirt and grass during matches. What's more, the seller didn't even have any authentication proof, no paperwork whatsoever. But Corey decided to take a gamble on this, and of course it didn't end well. Not only did the shop fail to retail it, they only got around $19,000 for it at an auction 2 years later. The cherry on top? Officials revealed that far from being a game-worn uniform, this one never even belonged to Mays. It was merely a salesman's sample that had very little value, even less than $5,000. But I guess Corey can sleep a little easier now, knowing that his blunder was only a loss of around $20,000 and not the whole $30,000. Besides, they did end up getting 19 grand for it, so all is not lost. Hopefully, Corey knows better now. Unlike Rick, who's still making smaller but costly mistakes like the time he bought a fake Wells Fargo strongbox, which was apparently so fake that show expert and regular favorite Mark Hall Patton, also known as the Beard of Knowledge, called it one of the most faked out items to ever exist. Ouch. That must have hurt really bad. What makes this case even worse isn't the money lost, since he only dropped around $450 on it, which compared to the other losses we've discussed so far, doesn't sound like a lot. But for a Wells Fargo strongbox, let alone a fake one, yeah, $450 is bad. What's more, Rick's sixth sense was telling him that something was wrong from the get-go. He was unsure of it, and yet he didn't listen to his gut. You can see that in how he correctly noticed that the same seller was wrongfully selling 2 ball and chain sets, calling them artifacts from the Yuma and Folsom prisons. Rick recognized that those were fakes, so how he even considered buying the box from the same seller will always be beyond me. Expert Mark simply called the box a complete fantasy piece. And honestly, between you and me, this deal is more amusing than frustrating. But at least it gave Mark yet another failure to hang over Rick's head and tease him about it. After this entire situation, it looks like Richard had forgotten his own mistakes in the past, when he wasted almost $30,000 on cubic zirconias in the 80s. For those who don't know, cubic zirconia were these synthetic diamond doppelgangers that hit the market around that time, and duped many pawn shops by easily disguising themselves as real diamonds, including this one. Harrison recalled how those items would always test as real diamonds, and so many bought a whole bunch of them. Thankfully, technology and knowledge have evolved to ensure ways to check for these cubic zirconias, and Corey has even filmed a YouTube video about it, so they're not much of a threat anymore. But that doesn't mean all diamonds are out. You can check if a diamond is real or not, but you can't check whether it's been stolen. Rick remembered a time in 2010 when a girl's best friend cheated on him. And mind you, this was a proper, planned-out scam. A sharp man in a full suit wanted to pawn diamond earrings, and his first go-to spot was the world-famous one, of course. Harrison did his questioning, the seller did his answering. He even had a receipt to prove authenticity. But like many good scams, that receipt was itself a fluke. Harrison gave up $40,000 on diamonds that ended up being stolen. The police showed up only 3 days later. The full-suit man got his sentence handed to him, and his victim got her diamonds back. But Rick, he only got one of the biggest busts of his life, a loss of $40,000. So, from spending a whopping sum of 40 grand on stolen diamonds to losing out on $100,000 at a failed auction, these were some Pawn Stars deals that almost left the shop bankrupt.